So you've just hired some new employees, you've had their pre-employment drug test, it came back negative, so you're good to go. And you wonder, well, why should I do any more drug testing? They've already been tested, clear that they're negative and they're not doing drugs. Well, that may not just be the case. I'm Tom Fulmer and welcome to the NDS Video Blog series with National Drug Screening. Today's guest with us is Joe Reilly, the president of National Drug Screening. Joe, welcome to the show today.
Hello, Tom. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you.
Good.
Thanks for joining us today and talking about pre-employment and drug testing for employers.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so one of the things that's a common misconception is if somebody takes that pre-employment test, well then obviously they're not doing drugs. So why is that not the case? If they take a test and they pass the test, even if everything was legitimate, how could that still be that they may be doing drugs or may have issues?
Well, that's a great question, Tom. So you do your pre-employment test and the applicant, person getting ready to start the job, is negative, so they don't use drugs. Well, they may have studied for the test and stopped using drugs for a couple of days and they're clean, and doesn't mean they don't use drugs, and just doing a pre-employment test does not mean that the company is a drug-free workplace.
So how does an employer protect themselves going forward? Obviously, they want to make sure they're testing not for just maybe the basics, but things that are of common abuse out there. Maybe they're doing something that's not testing for those things. Is that something important that they maybe look at what panel they're doing in that pre-employment to get started?
Yeah, well, everything's important, and of course the panel of drugs that you use, typically starts with a 5-panel, which is marijuana, cocaine, amphetamines, opiates, and PCP. Some companies elect to expand further. But what's really important for a company that wants to be drug-free is that they implement a comprehensive drug-free workplace program.
So what are some of the things that are going to be a part of that? So what are some of the components they need to make sure they have in place for that ongoing testing to make that policy effective and making sure their employees are drug-free? Absolutely.
So I've been working with employers for 20 plus years, and I've basically been putting the same program together for employers, a comprehensive drug-free workplace program that has 5 components: a written drug-free workplace policy, employee education, educating employees on the harmful effects of drugs, supervisor training, making sure supervisors know the policy, know how to manage the policy, and making sure they know about reasonable suspicion, signs and symptoms that an employee may be using drugs. Number 4, access to employee assistance programs. In other words, where can an employee get help if they do have a substance abuse issue? An employer should make that available. Where can they get help? It might be an in-house EAP program, it might be an outsourced program, but we need to make it available. Where can we get help? And then finally, drug testing. And drug testing is the trust and verify. And included in the pre-employment drug testing, we need to do random testing, because random testing is what puts teeth in the program. It identifies drug users, and it may deter folks from using drugs.
Right, and one thing to kind of wrap this up is that we talk about the pre-employment and you put the policy in place and all that. Situations change. People can start using because of a divorce or an issue. Any number of things can happen along that process, and that's why that random testing is so important. And something that you mentioned I want to come back to is the reasonable suspicion, having your supervisors trained to look for that as part of that. That's really a key component of that. And recently you wrote a book on that you have available. Can you share a little bit about that and what's covered in that and how that could be maybe helpful to the employers as part of that overall program?
Yeah, absolutely. So reasonable suspicion testing is really important, because if you've got somebody working and you're suspecting them of using drugs based on signs and symptoms, they're staggering, they got bloodshot eyes, they are slurred speech, they smell of marijuana, different things like that. Supervisors really need to be trained to identify those signs and symptoms. We recently published a book, Reasonable Suspicion for Drugs and Alcohol. It's a great starting point for a company to make that available to their supervisors, and we have additional training available, live training, webinar training, online training. Every company should have reasonable suspicion training for their supervisors.
Excellent. I think those are some great points. Joe, thank you very much for sharing that with us. Appreciate your coming in. And the book's available on nationaldrugscreening.com.
Good to be here, Tom.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us today for our video blog series. And remember, pre-employment testing doesn't mean drug-free employees. So have all those components that Joe mentioned to us in place, and you have a much better chance of having a safe work environment. For more information, visit us at nationaldrugscreening.com. Go to our blog and check out our other videos, blog posts, news, and information that can help you have a safer and more productive workplace. Thanks again for joining us, and check us out on our next video.